Welcome to Revitalize and Replant with Mark Clifton, where we equip pastors to take their churches from declining to thriving by pointing them to a new future and a new hope. Join us weekly for encouragement and practical advice in your pastoring journey.
I love what we're going to talk about today. I love what we're going to talk about today. You guys, I'm going to surprise you with this. This is Revitalize and Replant with Mark Clifton. There's Mark right there. And there's Mark Hallock right there. And I'm Dan Hurst. There's Kyle Bierman over there. Why are you guys so quiet all of a sudden?
I know, normally we say, hey, and I thought, well, let's just be quiet and see what he does.
Your voice is so mesmerizing.
It is.
Oh, yeah,
It puts us in a trance.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I just thought we'll just sit here and see what he does if we don't respond.
You know, the funny thing about it is we do these podcasts we sit down and do several at a time. And sometimes I have to get up and work, for a living. And I'll go from doing something like this and go into the booth and go, in a world,
Do a movie trailer.
And then I'll come back and talk to you. Hi, guys. That's awesome. All right, so let's do this today. Notes or no notes when you're preaching?
That's a fun topic.
Now, for those of you who know us, you know the guys I'm talking to.
Or manuscript
with
or
Hallock.
no manuscript.
Or manuscript or no manuscript. Yeah. But for those of you who may be new to this podcast.
Or overhead cells or no overhead cells.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keep it going, Cliff.
Handouts or no handouts. Here we go.
Fill in the blank. By the way.
So we've got two different styles of preachers in here. Clifton is a no-notes guy. Hallock is a notes guy. And so I thought it'd be fun to do a mano-a-mano type thing and just let you guys kind of talk about why you preach the way you do. And by the way, I will just say right at the offset, I think both of you are masters at what you do. I've known Clifton for,
40 years.
40. I think it's longer than that, to be honest.
Well, I've known you my whole life, but we've been working together for 40 years.
Well, that's true, yeah. And so Clifton is probably one of the best pulpiteers I know. But his style is very different. Well, that too. It started with that, didn't it?
That's what he was hoping you said.
Puppeteer.
Yeah. And so I've always known Clifton and known his style and everything. And always been impressed with that. And then I heard Hallock preach, I don't know, about 3 years ago, and I thought, dude, rocked it, man. It was just, his approach is. But you're an expository type of preacher.
Yeah, well, this is a great topic, by the way, and it's an important topic because, again, one thing that Clifton and I both, where we align, and we align on a lot of things, but is preaching the word. We believe in the word, preaching the word, and to be faithful in that. But today, part of what we're talking about is how personality, different maybe convictions or approaches to preaching. This is not necessarily a good or bad thing. A lot of it has to do with how you're wired. And so, and this is a fun topic because Clifton and I, in terms of personality, when it comes to preaching, we have very different personalities with this stuff. And I think it'll be helpful. I think this will be a helpful conversation. I pray it is, as we think about it. So what I would almost say, Clifton, and then I'm going to throw it to you, is in some ways, really what you're kind of talking about three categories in my mind is a no-notes guy, a notes guy, and a manuscript.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Because I think there's guys who, that middle category is probably where most actually guys fall.
Where they preach with notes.
Yeah, where they preach with notes. Yeah. That's right.
But not necessarily a manuscript.
Gotcha. And I preach a manuscript. And I'll talk about why. I think it'd be helpful for us to talk through a little bit the pros and cons of our different approaches to preaching, okay? So let's start with no notes. Let's start with the master over here, the no notes guy.
Well,
okay, let's talk about pros.
Well,
and
pros
maybe
are
some of the
you really don't have
cons.
to study or be prepared.
You just get up and
you
talk.
Just get up and talk, kind of off the
Anybody can do that.
Anybody can do that. You just pick a text and run with it.
But honestly, that's what some guys think.
I will say this. Of all the sermons that are recorded in the New Testament, none of them were given notice that they were going to preach that sermon.
That's true.
They just preached it on the spot.
Yep.
I think if you've been a pastor for a number of years, you should be able to preach a gospel message on the spot.
Yeah. I agree.
I think if you can't, then there's probably something going. I mean, now that doesn't mean you should always do that, obviously, and that kind of thing. I like what our brother H.B. Charles says. Speaking of preachers, he said, "Be yourself, but don't preach yourself." A good teacher like John the Baptist clears the way, declares the way, and then gets out of the way.
Ooh, that's good.
And I think you have to be yourself.
Yes.
And
amen.
I am just that sort of extemporaneous, kind of. I always have been.
Yeah.
And so being myself is being in the pulpit in a way where I'm really trying to understand who's in the room, understand what the Holy Spirit wants to say at that point, what the Holy Spirit is saying to me at that point, and how I'm supposed to communicate that. And in my heart and the way I do it, it really is sort of, it's hard to explain. I think if you preach this way, you understand it. It's almost like preaching on the ledge. It's almost like you get up there and either the Lord's going to speak to you or it ain't going to happen. All right? I'm serious about that.
Yeah.
So it's frightening, but it's also when the Lord speaks to you, it's very
it takes faith.
Very, very reward. It takes faith.
It takes faith.
It takes
Yeah,
faith.
yeah.
And so so that's what I do. What I do is I'll look at I have a text, obviously, and I'll know exactly how I want to start that, and I'll know exactly how I want to finish it. So, and I may have just a few sentences that remind me. I won't write out the whole introduction, but something to remind me what my introduction is, and something to remind me what my closing is. Especially as I get older, I need that.
Yeah.
I've had times, guys, when I've forgot what my closing is, and so I'm just circling the runway up there. How was I going to close this?
And everybody knows it.
Land
the plane.
So I'll put some notes. Just maybe be even a word or a phrase, but that will remind me what my introduction is, what my closure is. And then I will usually put 3 or 4 words in there, or 3 or 4 phrases that remind me to move from one point to the other on this text.
Yeah.
So I may go up there with just a small card, or I may write it in the margin of my Bible, or I may write it on the guest card in the pew before I go up there that morning. I mean, I know it in my heart, but I think, I'm getting older. I need to make sure I don't forget it. So sometimes I will just jot it down like that and do that. Look, I've been preaching almost 50 years, right at 50 years. I preached my first sermon when I was 15, 16 years old, so right at 50 years. And for a good bit of that, it's been every week and sometimes multiple times a week. And so in that time, you really do learn who you are. And I do think it's important to preach, as HB says, preach who you are, but don't preach yourself.
Yeah.
Don't try to be somebody else.
Yeah.
And so that's how I do it.
Yep.
Now, there was a time when I was at Warnell, and I was really reinventing myself at Warnell because I had always been a serial church planter. I would go plant a church, and within a year and a half or 2 years, I would pass it off to a founding pastor, and I would move on. And I did that a lot. Did 12 church plants that way. Well, when I go to Warnell, the Lord just spoke to me and to my wife and said, "You're not moving on here. You're staying here." And I go, "Well, now I've got to really change who I am, and the Lord's got to grow me in this." So He grew me as a leader. It was a very painful process, but a very helpful process. Now, He's going to grow me as a preacher. So some of the men I really look up to preach from manuscripts. And I thought, okay, Clifton, it's time to grow up and preach from a manuscript. Yeah. So I went out and bought a black 3-ring binder, dude. I was going to fill this up so that my grandkids could read all of my manuscripts 100 years from now, right? I remember the first sermon. I wrote it all out and had it, typed it up on the computer and printed it off and freehole punched it and stuck it in there. And I thought, we're going to do this from now on. Man, it was a train wreck.
It was miserable.
Yeah. Oh man, it was so bad. I couldn't whether it was, am I supposed to read this? Am I supposed to think about? And in the midst of that sermon, some stuff came to me I wanted to talk about, but it wasn't in the manuscript.
Where does it fit?
So now what do I do?
Exactly.
So I tried that for about 3 weeks, and it was a nightmare. And I thought, this is not me.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants those 3 sermons, they're still in that 3-ring binder, and I went away from it. So it's who you are.
Yeah, it is. That's right.
And
let me just say a few strengths, and just to encourage you. I mean, one thing is when you don't have notes, you're able to be fully present with the people. Ideally, I mean, your eye contact. You are with the people. You can read the people.
I know.
You do such a good job at that.
And you can. I'm so aware that the people I'm preaching to, man, they just got all kinds of issues and things going on in their life.
Yep.
And you're right. As I'm preaching, I'll see in their face. You can just feel in the room.
Yeah.
Man, this needs more attention. This is
Right.
where the Holy Spirit's moving right now.
That's right. That's right.
I wasn't expecting this.
Yep.
This is different. And so I can really push into that more,
Yep.
and maybe even skip something that I was going to do and spend more time on that.
Yeah.
It gives me a lot more flexibility. Now, if you don't have a understanding of how to sort of, as we say, read a room or respond, that's a very dangerous thing to do. And so that's really important.
Because, let's just be honest. What are some of the as somebody who is gifted in this way, what are some of the potential stumbling points or hindrances of preaching without
too
a
much
notes?
of yourself.
Too much of yourself.
When I was at Warnell and I wasn't using manuscripts, I went back to my old ways. I asked my elders, as others have said to do, to autopsy all of my sermons, and these young men became pretty good at it.
Yeah.
and there was a few times when they said, we could tell you thought you were losing. I'll never forget this. Kumar Venugopal, who was from India and the only convert in his family, a new convert, he said, because he didn't grow up in the evangelical bubble, and so he had a real way to feed into my life about preaching because he was hearing it differently, really. He said, Mark, I could tell that when you feel like you're losing the crowd, losing the audience for a little bit, you tend to get away from the text and start telling stories to bring them back.
Interesting.
And he said, I think you need to trust the text more and not your ability to tell stories.
Oh, man.
And, there's a place for stories.
Yeah,
There's a place,
right.
But he was right.
That's wise, though.
It was wise.
Yeah.
And so I've been, very... If you're a good storyteller and you're a good extemporaneous speaker,
Yep.
is that the way? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
You can begin to rely on that.
Totally.
And, Spurgeon said, it's not your weaknesses that'll be your downfall in preaching, it's your strengths, because you'll begin to rely on those. So, can you tell a good story? Can you knit a good narrative?
Yeah,
can
that's
you
right.
keep people's attention?
Yep.
Well, you'll begin to rely on that.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the
Yeah,
dangers.
and
If
that's
you're a
right.
good extemporaneous speaker, you tend to rely on that ability, not the Holy Spirit.
Right. Yep.
The other thing is you tend sometimes to lose your place. If you don't have a manuscript, timing-wise, you spend way too much time on one point, and you need to move to the other.
That's a good point. Yep.
So that's a really important part. And then thirdly, sometimes, as I said, if you're not careful, you kind of forget where you are.
Yeah.
Just like I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And you really, and you kind of wander out there.
I think the other thing is this. I think, especially for young guys, you got to have something to say. Like, what's painful is sometimes hearing guys who have no notes get up there. Like, talking is not, hear me well, talking's not the problem for us preachers. I mean, I can get up and talk and talk and talk. It's what do you have to say? And again, this is probably transitioning to where I want to go a little bit in terms of the pluses of manuscripting. You got to have something to say. Now, you do.
Well,
people don't know how much you've spent time in the Word. Like, you've thought through this. Like, you're not just getting up there.
And I'm being frank about it. I'm dyslexic, and I'm not a good reader. I have a hard time reading.
Yeah.
Even when I was in elementary school, my teachers, they would have the spelling tree on the wall, and it had apples with your name on it. And basically how you did on the spelling bee that week, whether your name was at the top of the tree. I'm not making this up, dude. It was hard being in school in the 1960s. My apple was always on the ground. I'm serious, because I've always failed the spelling test. I remember my dad, the word was chicken, and he was trying to get me to spell. It was on the spelling list. I was probably in second grade or something. I couldn't spell chicken. And he got really frustrated, obviously. Mark, it's not that hard. You're not concentrating. I can't. I'm dyslexic.
Yeah.
To this day, if somebody gives me a phone number, I've got to repeat it. So I don't read well. So I have a hard time reading. And so I listen to books.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
I listen to podcasts, and I can retain a lot of what I hear.
Right.
So even I don't want people to think I don't sit around and read books all day like some folks. It's mostly audio, and I listen.
And that's who you are, though. That's how God's made you. I mean, it goes back to the original point. You've got to be you.
Right.
And, in terms of learning and even communicating. Now, let me say this, because I'm watching the time here. I affirm so much of everything you said.
Well, we can do this one, and then the next podcast can be.
Well, maybe let's do that. Yeah, that's actually good. That's a good idea. Let's keep going. Well, go ahead.
Well, the other danger is that you forget where you are. You spend too much time on one topic. You bring too much of yourself into it. You try to become more of an entertainer, that kind of thing. But my mentors in preaching, because of my age, I mean, they were Adrian Rogers and Charles Stanley. I mean, and a guy named Jack Taylor that most of you don't know who he is. But those were my mentors in preaching as a young man. And so, like, if I'm going to preach about the Jesus walking on the water, I know what's the, and I'd get up there with these. They're in my notes now in my Bible.
Yeah.
The reason to get out of the boat, the reward to get out of the boat. You know,
I had
all they all started with the same letter, right? Or on the Good Samaritan, you know, he was about bending, tending, sending, mending, and spending. Okay.
But it's memorable, man.
It's memorable.
It is, yeah.
And so I'll have those in my Bible or in my notes. And even when I look at a text, my mind goes, what are four words I could put in this text to move it along?
Yeah.
How can I do that? Now, I don't necessarily want to begin with all the same letter anymore because that gets a little forced.
Yeah.
But there was a time we did that all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
But still, that's kind of the way I think when I see a text.
Yep.
I try to divide it into what are 3 or 4 points that I can do, and then from that, I really just ask the Lord to help me at the moment know what He wants me to say and how He wants me to say it. And it just works for me. And if I try to stick to a manuscript, first of all, I can't be creative in the manuscript.
Yeah.
It's like I'm tied to that,
Right.
And
Yep.
and I can't be, and so that's just who I am in that.
What would you say then to young pastors who are like, man, I see what Clifton does, and I want to do that, and I think I can do that. I'm gonna just start trusting the Lord and living by faith in that pulpit. And I'm just, like, what would just be your counsel?
I do help guys. I say I want
First of all, get your resume ready.
That's right. That's right. I do say, like some of the young men I've been mentoring even recently, I say I want you to write out your introduction because they get up. It's how you begin a sermon is so important. Yeah. And I'm real cognizant of that. Yeah. I mean, real cognizant of how I begin it and how I end it.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to get up there and go, well, glad to be here today, and thank you for that great music. That was, sometimes you do that. Yeah. But if the music has been really powerful and impactful, if someone has just been praying, corporate prayer, I just want to get up there. What I say first is really powerful.
Yeah, right.
And drawing their attention. You don't get up there and just ramble off sort of the same greetings everybody does. Or
there has to be a clear starting point. Even if you do, even if you're thankful, and I've seen you do this. It's like we know when we're starting now.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. But my most favorite way to do it is just to get in the pulpit and start preaching. And there have been times, if I'm wired up for sound, there have been times that even before I get up on the platform, I'll start. So as I'm walking, as I leave the first row pew up to I'll just say, the Apostle Paul made it really clear when he was in prison and in chains, and they look, and then you get up there and you're just you're going right to the text.
Yeah.
So I tell guys, write out your introduction, know what you're going to say, so you get that clear, and then I tell them fully write out each of your points. All right, and if you have a couple of sub points, how you're going to make write out a transition sentence. How am I going to get from this point to that point? I don't have to write those out anymore. I just know how to do it.
I'm going to stop. Transitions are key.
They're key. So I tell guys, if you want to be more extemporaneous, write out your full a paragraph. Write out and if you need to read it, that's your introduction, and then your points, and then under that, how am I going to move from this point to that point? What's my transition to the next one? And then I would say, write out your conclusion. And if you've got 3 points and you look at the clock and you've been 40 minutes, skip the third point. Just go to the conclusion. Don't feel like, because if you're not preaching from manuscript, you got to be real cognizant of time.
Yeah.
And you can spend too much.
That's right.
Yeah. So you've got to be very cognizant of that. And so I'm always thinking about that as well.
I'm just going to say, and you said this a couple of times, but I want to reiterate it. Pacing is so important, because you're right. You can get, if you got 30 minutes you're preaching, and if you without a manuscript, you could spend 20 minutes and you're still on point 1.
Yeah.
And now it's very obvious you've rushed the 2 points, and you may have had some really good stuff to say about point 3, but you don't have time anymore.
So sometimes, I will encourage guys even to put in their notes a time, like 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 7 minutes, and try and make that transition.
That's good.
And if they do that year after year, they'll get to where it just kind of becomes natural.
Right.
And they kind of even have it's like a quarterback that he's in. He's holding the ball. He kind of knows how long he's got before he's going to get sacked. And it's kind of silly, but it's true. I kind of know. Okay, I got to move on to the next one.
Right.
I sense that time has come for me to move on. There may be some things I wanted to say, but I got to move on to the next point, or we're not going to get through this. And so that comes with discipline as well.
Yeah.
And so I also think needs to be, and this is maybe tougher if you have a manuscript. I think it's real important the way people hear things to have some rhythm, some quieter moments, and some more emphatic moments.
Yep.
Some really heavy moments, and maybe even some lighter moments. I remember I was in a meeting one time, and someone asked, Piper, is it okay to use humor in a message? He said, sure, if it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Now, you don't do it just to get a laugh.
No, right.
You don't do it. But again, I can kind of tell sometimes when we're into something really heavy, and we sort of need to take a break from that,
Take a
so
breath.
that we can get into something heavy again in a minute.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And so I kind of think about that.
Well,
and
that's
I think,
feeling out the people too.
It is, and how people hear
Yeah,
it, and how much they can absorb at
Exactly.
one moment.
Yep.
So you do something really heavy, and then maybe you move to something, you tell a story about yourself or something, and it kind of lightens up a little bit.
Yep.
And then you can come right back in, and I'm not being manipulative. It's just the way people
that's right.
hear
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
And so there needs to be that rhythm, both of. And again, when I was at Warnell, the elders would tell me, they would say, you're too loud and too passionate throughout the whole sermon. You need to have some quieter moments and some back down moments, and start out slower and that kind of thing. And then the ending is so important.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what I'll do on the ending, and I don't mind doing this at all, I will look for Martin Lloyd-Jones, I'll look for Charles Spurgeon, I'll look for somebody who's very gifted at how to wrap something up. I'm not real gifted as that, as you can tell. I've been rambling now for about 8 minutes on this. So landing something is not my gift. And I'm fully aware of that.
Yeah, right.
So I will look at Spurgeon or Martin Lloyd-Jones or somebody like that, and I'll see how a conclusion they might have.
Right. How did they land
And
it?
I will often say, Charles Spurgeon, he summed this up in a way that I couldn't do any better. And then I will read it. I'll have that there, and I'll read it with passion. And I'll read it with real. And I won't just read it cold. I will practice that ahead of time.
Yep.
And that will be my conclusion.
Yeah.
And that helps me end it and wrap it up. And I'll do that a lot. I'll end with a Spurgeon, 2 or 3 paragraphs, or Martin Lloyd-Jones or somebody else, because they know how to put that thing together.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
I don't.
Yeah.
And so, I have a hard time ending it.
That's
as
so
As
good.
you can tell.
Man.
So start out by writing your introduction, writing your points, writing your transition, timing those, having a good conclusion, whether you write it or you find somebody else. You find somebody else, just say, hey, Charles Spurgeon said this better than I could probably say it. Let me just share that with you. And just do it.
Lean on, that's so good, man. Well, great thoughts.
All right, well, then we're going to continue with this, because I'd like to hear Hallock talk a little bit about your approach to what you do, because you're more of a manuscript notes guy. I was listening to Mark, and back in the old day, when we did the alliteration thing, that was kind of the way that we were taught. I remember sitting in seminary, just having to design messages.
A requisite for getting out of the boat.
Exactly.
A reason for getting out of the boat, and a reward for getting out of the boat. The only time I ever used requisite in my life was in that sermon, because it started with an R.
Well, I had a sermon that I had preached that I had developed called The Plan. Let's see, it was called The Place, the Plan, the Purpose, the Power.
Oh, P's were always good.
Oh yeah, you had to use that.
A
lot of good.
A lot of good words with P's.
Except that one year I was in Honduras. And I was at the Baptist convention down there, and just out of the blue, I was just sitting there, and the whoever was up at the pulpit said, well, we don't normally do this, but we're going to ask Brother Dan Hurst to come up and preach to us here. And I'm sitting there just completely, and I had nothing planned at all, So I thought, well, I'll do the place, the plan, the purpose, the power. Except that alliteration doesn't work in Spanish.
Backfired.
That was a mess of a sermon. All right. Next time we meet together on this, we're going to talk to Hallock and talk about his approach to preaching and get some ideas and some plans for that. We hope this has been a blessing to you. Thank you, Mark, for sharing your heart on that. And thank you for being a part of what we do. We look forward to doing this a couple of times a week. Thanks to the North American Mission Board for making this possible. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us today on Revitalize and Replant. This podcast is brought to you by the North American Mission Board, where we help dying or struggling churches regain health for the glory of God and the good of their communities. If you found this conversation helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. To learn more about becoming a replanting pastor or to explore resources about revitalization for your own church, visit churchreplanters.com.